Good morning, this is woodblock printmaker Dave Bull speaking to you from a new place for these video presentations, my little corner of our new shop on the ground floor of the Mokuhankan building in Asakusa here in Tokyo. It has been far too long since the previous video, and for that I apologize. Those of you who have been following our activities on various social media platforms know the main reason behind this delay, the work to build this beautiful new shop. But we're up and running now, and I have run out of excuses. It's time for a video. What to talk about? I don't know what kind of video to make. I know I'd like to do another process video showing the scenes of colors. We've got one coming now. The colors building up and up on the upcoming Ukiyo-e Heroes print, Times Burn Bright. But actually our staff members Cameron-san and Suga-san, the printer, are working on that one already. She's going through the colors one by one by one. They're recording it up on the third floor. And as soon as she's got to the end of the process and all the clips are in the can, that video will be coming to you right away. So for me, should I do another one of those David's Choice videos where I pick something from our collection or our shop and show it to you? I've got lots of prints waiting in the wings, but we just had one of those videos. I don't want to get too repetitive here. Actually though, I should just come out and admit it. What people have been asking for in emails, in person here in the shop, and in comments on the YouTube channel, what people are asking for is another one of those rambly story type videos, like the one I told a while back about Ito Susumu, the old carver I knew. Me too, you know, I'd love to do another one of those, but I've been kind of hesitant to try it again because I don't really know if I can come up with another story that could come out quite as well as that one did. That was so cool, you know, it started quietly, it rolled along, gathering itself as it went. It had a bit of drama. I mean, Ito-san died partway through, and it rounded out so nicely at the end. It had video clips for me to show, interesting tools to include. I've rewatched that thing myself in a kind of amazement. Wow, what a neat story. So I've been afraid of trying again. I've got an endless number of episodes, people I've met and influenced by, and things that have happened, but how to turn them into such a wonderful story. So you can see where I'm at with this. It's that old catchphrase, the perfect is the enemy of the good. I've so much wanted to do another great video that I've ended up doing nothing. There's only one way out of it. It's time just to dig into my file of potential video ideas. Just grab something that looks like it might be fun and interesting to talk about. And whether or not it wraps up into a perfect story, just don't worry about that. Well, that's what I've done over the past few days. I've gathered something together, and I'm going to talk to you about the very first woodblock prints I ever purchased. They're absolutely fantastic and beautiful objects, and it's a set of 4 large prints. And without question, the minute that I caught sight of these prints, the very minute, was a moment that changed my life. And then when you think about how events cascade down the years and everything we've built since then, it turns out that it wasn't just my life that was changed. Now, to help tell a story, as before, I've gathered the prints themselves along with some other items that might help illustrate the stream of events. And although there will be no perfect resolution to the story this time around, let's just give this a try. Are we ready? This story begins on a rainy day in Okayama in western Japan. It was actually my first ever trip to Japan. It was in, I think, the winter of 1981 to 1982. I'd been living in Vancouver and had just finished a huge programming job for the music company that I'd been working for on and off for 10 years. And for a year or so, I'd been living with a young Japanese woman who would later become the mother of my kids. And I had met her on the transcontinental train that runs across Canada. I had been living in Toronto for a couple of years, and when my term at the music store finished there and I was going back to Vancouver, I thought rather than fly across, which I'd done 100 times before, I'd take the train and take it slow. Life-changing decisions. In the seat next to me was this young lady who was traveling around North America, and I'm not sure if she caught my eye because she was Japanese or just whatever, because she was a young lady, I don't remember. The reason I ask that is because when I had been living in Toronto, I had started to develop an interest in things Japanese. I'd been living alone, so I'd been going out to restaurants, and Japanese food really caught my, and it was just suited to me. The portions were small, it looked beautiful. So I'd been in the habit of going to Japanese restaurants here and there. Well, here and there, many days a week. And on one particular day, while going to the restaurant, I'd been a bit earlier than I think I'd been intended to go, and walking down the street, it was on Dundas Street in Toronto. There was a gallery called the Stuart Jackson Gallery. It was a tiny little hole-in-the-wall gallery. And they had a little display of Japanese woodblock prints. I guess there must have been a sign outside, come and see our Japanese woodblock prints. I had no knowledge of them, no interest, no nothing. Just I was on my way for dinner, but here it was. Go inside and take a look. And he had some stuff on the wall, and I don't even remember now what it was, because I didn't understand them well enough to understand what I was looking at, but I did understand that, wow, this stuff was beautiful. He had them lit the same way that we light prints in our gallery here these days. We've got a nice side light, and the prints look quite spectacular, you know. And I remember nothing about our conversation. You know, what are these Japanese woodblock prints? Whatever. And if I said that at that moment I decided I was going to become a Japanese woodblock printmaker, that wouldn't be true. It's totally, of course, not true. But some kind of seed went into my mind, and something that was to flourish later on was planted that day. Anyway, as I said, I finished my tour in Toronto and I was coming back to Vancouver, and maybe the Japanese food and the prints I'd seen created an interest, I don't know. But I talked to the young lady, we talked a bit more, and by the time we got to Vancouver 3 days later, it was game over. We started living together, and one thing led to another. She was studying English, trying to get a medical certification. She was going to be a registered nurse, and I was spending my time studying what was then called microcomputers to see if I could figure out how to get involved with them. You know, it was before the era of what we would now call personal computers. They were called microcomputers. So she's doing her studies, I'm doing my studies. I've got some free time. Give it a try to make some woodblock prints like the ones I'd seen in the gallery back there. Now this is pre-internet. Maybe I went to the library, there's nothing. There was absolutely no information about how to do this. But Canadian culture, you know, you don't look for a teacher, you sort of think about how can I do it myself. It's a DIY culture. So I got a piece of wood. I know the house we were living in had a fireplace upstairs. The people lived up there had a fireplace, and their wood storage was down in the basement. So I grabbed some kind of piece of wood from it. Tools, I had none and didn't even know what real tools were. So it was a cutter knife that was lying around the house. When it came time to try and print the thing, I used a rice scoop that we had there. Just scattered random tools. The first one I made, I don't have it because at the first moment I made it, it was like, oh my God, this is so awful. The ones I looked at looked so beautiful. How difficult could this be? It's wood, color, and paper. The first one just went straight back into the fireplace right away. But something in my character, a little bit stubborn, who knows, whatever, I don't really know why, I decided to try again. Okay, so I've got some of those early samples here. Now, David here isn't an artist, and he knew he wasn't an artist, but whatever, this idea about making prints, so he tried it two ways. One way, I'll get another camera here. I can't show you and hold these up easily, so I'll get another camera here, and I'll show you this way. You can see this, it's not an original print, it's a Japanese design. And what I had done is I must have gone to the library or something, got a copy of a Japanese print, traced it, and tried to cut it out. And whatever, it's recognizable as a woodblock print. There's chips and pops here, it's on some kind of junk paper that I must have had. It's a terrible mess, but there it is. It's the start of a kind of a long journey. And then, again, I don't really remember my way of thinking, but I followed it with a few others that I had tried to design myself. Now, by this time, clearly now, I'm looking at some kind of library book and I've seen prints like Shinhaga prints or something like that. And you can see there's an attempt to make a full moon and a beautiful deep sky. And it says here, under the moon, 5 views under a full moon. So I was, you know, I'd been looking at prints and trying to think about this. I had no idea yet of the fact that you could separate the idea of designing prints and making prints. It was just totally experimental. As I said, she was spending her days studying, and I was spending my days and evenings fooling around with these little scraps of paper. Look at this, is another one. I didn't finish my 5 views of the moon. This is 5 views of Japanese architecture. Why 5? I have no idea. Doesn't matter. Who knows? They were fun experiments. Whatever. Day by day, life with her went along, rolling along. And at some point in that winter, 1991, she and I decided to take a trip to Japan. For her, she had to go and see her family and do some paperwork related to her immigration to Canada. And for me, it was my chance to get my first look at that really, really fascinating country. I'd enjoyed the food, I'd enjoyed chatting with this girl, I was making woodblock prints. Time to go to Japan. When we got there, we got a cheap train pass. We were young enough at that time to qualify for the young train passes, and we headed up north first, I think. We made a longish tour that would end up at her family's place in Mie Prefecture. And we timed that for the New Year's, so we would spend the New Year's season at her family's place. And then once our obligations there were done, we traveled around towards Western Japan. And it was while we were down in Okayama that lightning struck. It was a total rainy day. It was just pissing down. There was just rain everywhere. We came out of the train station. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Just whatever. There was a department store in front of the train station. In we went just to get out of the rain. I don't know if you know anything about Japanese department stores. They are worlds of them in themselves. They have everything. It's food down in the bottom. It's art galleries up at the top. It's funeral parlors, wedding, you name it. You can get anything you want in a Japanese department store. So whatever, we're hanging in there just looking around things, mostly keeping out of the rain, as I said. Excuse me. And somewhere up near the top of the thing, there must have been some kind of display of art. And I think actually it was a traveling salesman. He'd brought prints, woodblock prints of different kinds. He had them up there, and he was doing what you would call a spot sale. And this set of prints was on display there. And this, as I said in the intro to this video, this was the thing that was absolutely a life-changing experience. I didn't know it at the time, but that's what it turned out to be. Again, I'll use the side camera here rather than try and flip and flip and flip all the way around. It's the artist's name, Okada Yoshio. I couldn't read this at that time. And it's the Genji Emaki. And what this is, it's a set of 4 woodblock prints based on the Tale of Genji series. Now what was happening, this was I forgot what year, I told you what it was, 1991 or something. Before this, in the 1970s, a Japanese newspaper had run a series, on a Sunday series, about the Tale of Genji. It's an old Japanese novel written, whatever, 1,000 years ago. They talk about it as being the first novel in the world ever written by a young woman we now call, I've forgotten her name, Murasaki Shikibu. Sorry about that, excuse me. You can see the holes in my research here. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're talking about the woodblock prints. The series had run in a series of Sunday supplements for 1 year, and some enterprising publisher, and the company was called Yuyudo. The man's name was Saiki Shinichi. He became a friend of mine later. At that time, I knew nothing about this. He had seen that newspaper series and said, there's something here. We've got to make some woodblock prints out of this. He contacted the artist or the newspaper company, got together, and anyway, they ended up making a set of 4 woodblock prints on these pictures. I heard later on that they had actually planned maybe to make a series of the whole 50-odd pictures, but they didn't get past 4. Too much talk. Let's show you these pictures. I don't know if they're going to have the same impact on you that they had on me, but my God, they are just incredible. Again, like I said, we'll use the side camera here. The word you're seeing here is hotaru, and each of the lady characters in this book is labeled not with a real name. They may not actually even have real names. They're labeled with some item from the scene in which we first see them. This young lady first comes to the attention of the hero of the book in an evening scene surrounded by fireflies. And this is the woodblock print that resulted. Can I spend a half an hour describing it to you? Do I need to do this? It's just incredible. It's based on the old ukiyo-e traditions in the sense that it's lines carved and then filled in with flat color in the areas. This is the idea about making all these prints. But look what they've done. Of course, she's behind a transparent curtain here, translucent curtain. They've arranged the color blocks in such a way that we get this sense of transparency, although of course there's no curtain actually here on the paper. I could talk all night about it. Things like this at the bottom of the print here, they've tried to do a depth to show the darkness of the room, and they've done it with carving extra blocks to go on top and then adding gradations from the bottom. All these effects on the back, this is not poor printing. These are carefully calculated ways to add depth to this print. With us in Japanese woodblock printmaking, we don't print with white. We can't apply light to a print. The way we create light is by surrounding it with darkness. These firefly illuminations, what you're seeing is the paper showing through, and it's surrounded by a darker area. I saw this sitting there along with its compatriots, which I'll show you in a minute, and I just had not ever imagined that there could be such a thing. Let's look at the others one by one here quickly. That's Hotaru, the first one. This second one is Akashi. It's, again, the name of the label that's applied to one of the other characters in the book. I still get a kick every time I see these things. I still get a kick out of these. You know, the pleasure just does not stop. The number of colors and the blocks, the hair here, it's sort of a fantabulous hair. It's a mix of styles. Okada Yoshio himself likes this style of just adding hair and hair and hair. And then back in the Heian era itself, any pictures or sketches we have from the Heian Jidai always show cascading hair like this. Whether these women actually had such long hair or whether it was a convention, I don't know. And again, layers and layers for the depth. The rusty color you see here, the vermilion pigment, which is a kind of mercury, is starting to oxidize and to lose some color. And I'll try and do a B-roll later where you can see some of these. These patterns are printed in a gold pigment. They're perhaps not so visible here under this side camera. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful prints. The next one in this series of 4 is the character called Wakana. And this is perhaps the least dramatic of the 4 pictures. It's the same kind of style. We're looking at a young woman in the Heian era, and again, it seems to be all about the hair. Okada Yoshio's style is not something that everybody likes. I've learned this in the intervening years. You know, the way he draws women's faces. It seems to be kind of attractive and appealing to men, Western men specifically. And some of the Japanese women I've talked to over the years really don't find this attractive. Irrespective of the content of this, my interest in these is just the drop-dead beauty of the physical object we are looking at here. Pigment on paper. It's just incredible. The scale, the size of them, the number of colors that go on. It was an insane project to take on. They sold the prints at that time, I think they were just over 80,000 yen, which at the time would have been about $1,500 in our currency. Look at this one. Matsukaze, which translates literally as pine, wind. Maybe it's the breeze through the pines is the feeling about this young lady's nickname. And look at this thing. It's simple. It's stripped down to bare essentials. We have a woman, a scrap of clothing, and some hair. Is it too erotic? I don't know. I don't think there's anything nasty about this. It's sort of pure eroticism. And it's all about the line. Going right back to Ukiyo-e 300 years ago. It's all about the line, the flowing line. Anyway, as I said, I saw them. I should put one up here so we can see it while I chat and talk. Let's put this one up here. I saw them there, and as she and I looked at them, I don't remember her reaction to these, but my reaction was, as I said, just changed my life. We didn't buy them right there that rainy day. You can't walk around rainy Japan with a bunch of woodblock prints in your hand. And anyway, they were too expensive. We didn't have money in our hand. Time goes by, time goes by. We get back to Tokyo a few weeks later, and I arranged to visit the publisher's office. He was hugely friendly to me, and it's funny, I don't really know why. We were just some random traveler. I saw your prints, can I buy a set here, please? You know, so he got them out on the table, and we put the money on the table, and we bought the set of prints. But I must have talked to him about the fact that I was interested in making Japanese prints. And the reason I know that is because we came home from that trip with a bunch of woodblocks from his outfit. Not carved woodblocks, blank pieces of wood stamped with his name that he'd ordered for his own production capabilities. So I must have told him that I was planning on doing this, and he helped support me by getting some of these supplies. And he gave me a couple of other really neat things that day. He gave me a copy of the book that had been made after the newspaper series was published. A book was published later in the next year with the full set of designs as they appeared in the newspaper. These are not woodblock prints. These are just pictures that appeared as they would in the newspaper. And for example, if we show you the one that we just did as a woodblock print here, again, side camera. This is the image that became the print, the Hotaru, the firefly print. And you can see this is a watercolor painting. This is not a woodblock print. And Saiki-san and his craftsmen took this and adapted it into the print that you saw a moment ago. This was a treasure for me. He gave it to me. It's getting a bit worn nowadays. I have looked through this any number of times. It's quite nice. It's got Okada-san's signature at the front, and also the signature of the lady who did the Japanese text, Tanabe Seiko. She was quite a noted author at the time. But he gave me something else much more closely related to my work. He gave me an old woodblock. And for him, it was just something that was junk. His publishing company had been in business for, I don't know, decades and decades and decades. They'd been going on since at least the Taisho era. And he gave me one of the wood blocks that they were getting ready to throw out into the scrap heap. It's the key block to one of the prints in the famous Tokaido series. Again, I should dangle it for this side camera here to get a better view on it. It's the print called Chiryu. Now please understand, this is not an original Hiroshige era woodblock from the 1860s. This is from a reproduction that was made in the Taisho era. And I guess I don't know why he gave it to me. It was obviously, it's out of use. It's split and cracked and popped and warped and totally unusable. But for me, over the years since I got this, especially in the early years, it's been an absolute treasure trove. I've learned so much. You might think, what can you learn from carving by looking at a block? But you can. When you get it under the scope and under a lens and look at this, you can see the angle the guy's hand moved, the way he did this. You can see the way that some of it was carved without turning the block. These days, jokers like me were carving. We turn the block around, turn the block around, turn the block around. The top carvers in the old day didn't do that. They'd put this block bang on their table and they'd carve it with moving it only a minimal amount. And then when it goes to the printer, a block that's carved that way is so easy to print because the angles are all smooth and the paste just sweeps off the block. It's a master class in woodblock carving, an absolute master class. I learned a huge amount from it back then. I haven't looked at it too much in recent years, but now that I think about it, it may be time to get it out and start looking at it again. An absolute treasure. For him, it was just going to go in the trash. It's quite thin, and what probably happened, he wasn't able to tell me this because he didn't know the history of this particular piece of wood. Our wood blocks usually are about 23 millimeters thick. You carve something on it, and the key block would only be carved on one side. If you carve too much from both sides, the block warps a little bit too much for a key block. So it would have been carved on one side, and then when it wore out, they would have planed it down to this thinness and carved another image on it. And once it gets this thin, you can't carve it down and plane it again. So this is probably the second pass for this specific piece of wood. My God, it even sounds like music. Anyway, I'm rambling much too muchness. I go back to Canada with her. We've had a totally fun time in Japan. I'm going back with this beautiful set of prints and these little souvenirs and things. And printmaking now for me is, well, it's still a hobby. I want to try this, but it's a hobby with a bit more to it now because I can see this stuff. I've got a goal. Look at this, how beautiful they can be. Can I do that? It was impossible, but over the next couple of years, I tried making some different kinds of prints. I've got a few more of them here. Some of them were, again, they were reproductions of Japanese original designs, of Japanese traditional designs, and some of them were things that I was struggling to think about myself. And what's the word? That stress between these two things is a major factor through my whole printmaking life, especially in the early years. I liked making stuff. I liked cutting pieces. I should put these for the camera here, I'm sorry. I liked making stuff. I liked cutting pieces of wood and mucking with pigments. But when it came time to sit there and draw stuff, it just clearly wasn't in my skill set, you know. And again, I didn't at this time understand clearly that the whole world in Japan was different. Designers could design and carvers could happily carve. I still didn't grok that fact. Anyway, moving along. Among the things I tried making as sample prints was this one. You might remember this, right? You just saw it a minute ago. Let me move some stuff out of the way here. I went back to Okada-san's book, dug up another one of the designs here. Let's see if I can find it. Here, this one. This is the Akashi design, and I traced over it, and I made my own version. Now, of course, you can laugh, whatever. It's nowhere near as good as that, but this is still early years for me. Eh? Again, there's no internet, no books, no nothing. Just trying to have a go at getting a handle on how this all might work. Okay, now where is all this going? How are we going to tie this together? Where did we end up in Asakusa here? At that time in Vancouver, there was really, not just me was interested in Japan. Interest in Japan was in the air. There was a group called the Mokuhankan, the Thursday group. And it was a group of business people and maybe Japanese expatriates and people who had an interest in Japan. They would meet up a couple times a month. Drink a bit of sake, drink a bit of beer, chat, talk about Japan, share experiences, whatever. Just a Japanese fan club, as it were. I helped with some of the activities. The group put on a little festival and helped support the Japanese festivals that were going on in town. So the people in the group knew of my interest in this and knew of my interest in woodblock printmaking. And in 1985, there was a big sort of festival down by the waterfront there called the Asia Pacific Festival, with groups and activities and stuff from all over Asia. And somebody there knew of me through Mokuhankan and said, Dave, will you do a demonstration of Japanese woodblock printmaking? The blind leading the blind. Whatever, there's nobody else in town who could do such a thing. So I said, sure, whatever, I'll take it on as long as we don't pretend that I'm a printmaker. I'm just going to sort of show what I can about how this might work. Yeah, anything you want, anything you want, anything you want. They're looking for people to fill up their booths. I said I'd do it, and I had I had another agenda in mind. I'd been playing with this and making them, and some of the people around me said, hey, that looks cool, you know, can I have one or something like this? And I was starting to think about the possibility. Could I actually, at some point, if I could get my skills together, could I become a printmaker? Could I make these things and sell these things? So I thought that Asia Pacific Festival would be a really cool test of doing this, that show my prints, and if somebody said, can I buy this? You know, it would be a test of all this. Now, the thing is, though, when you've got a traditional image like this is Okada Korean, there's no copyright. It's way out of copyright. I could clearly cut this and sell this. It's public domain stuff. Excuse me. But I can't do that with this. This is owned by somebody else. This was Okada-san. I could play with it by making a reproduction like this, but I certainly couldn't sit there and sell these things. So I came up with the idea. I wrote a letter. I wrote it to Saiki-san back in Japan. He was the only contact I had there. I wrote a letter asking if he could put me in touch with Okada-san. Maybe I could get permission to sell some of these things. After all, Okada-san had clearly done this sort of thing before, having prints published. And I've got a copy of my letter here, and I can look at this. It's actually a letterhead. We're thinking, David Bull, fine woodblock prints. Jumping the gun a little bit here, I think, but whatever. Anyway, in there I outlined the plan that I said. I was still an amateur. I'm going to do this at a festival. If I was going to sell these for a few bucks each, would it be okay to pay him a royalty, or you know, what would be the deal? 1 week go by, 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by. I was thinking, oh well, there it is. They've ignored me. But lo and behold, a letter comes from Okada-san. Handwritten, beautifully done in English. I spoke to him later on when I get to know him. He doesn't speak English at all, so he must have had somebody do this for him as he dictated. Mr. David Bull, I have looked at your works and was very impressed. So I will certainly accept your selling the prints, but I will have to ask you to sell them under these conditions. Number one, the number of prints must be limited to 300. Number two, you must pay 270,000 yen by October 1985. If you have any more questions or desires, please be sure to let me know. I wish you all the luck. I had really mixed feelings about this. Wow, he's okay. He says he was impressed. He'll accept me selling the prints. Must be okay, but the terms he set at that time in Canada, 270,000 yen, it's like $5,000. It was way more than what I had said I was going to try and sell the prints for at the festival. So clearly he didn't want me to go ahead with this project in the way that I had said. It's okay, no problem, whatever. Of course, I did, I put his prints aside. I did the festival with my own little simple reproductions and traditional prints. I don't remember at this point. My bookkeeping and stuff is all in storage long ago, so I don't remember how many I sold. We did sell a few, and there was some interest in it. And I took that interest and tried to grow it, and that year I went to half a dozen what they call craft fairs or craft festivals. I got a little wooden frame with some curtains and some tables and some posters, and I did half a dozen or so craft festivals all over the lower mainland in BC. It was a time, maybe they're still doing it, when that kind of a thing was they were all over the place. Summer festivals, autumn festivals, winter, Christmas festivals. I sold a few prints, but I learned something really important. As much as I like, making these things, mucking around with wood and carving and playing with the paper, it's sure not so much fun trying to sell them. You get your truck, you get your thing, you drive here, you drive there, you try and talk to people. It really wasn't a sensible idea. And when you look at it now, there shouldn't have been any discussion in my mind. I had a not so bad job, I was working for the music store by this time. I'd been on and off for them for 10 years, but by now I was actually the general manager of the whole company. The boss had put me in the corner office, and he'd gone off to do finance and vision, and I was actually running the place. I was getting a music hit. I was playing baritone sax and flute in an amateur jazz band. We even made a couple of records. I had 2 kids, babies, 3 years old, 1 year old. The boss, one day he brings me and says, Dave, you're doing really well here. It's looking good. I'm getting a bit older. Tell you what, do you want to deal in for a part of the company? Everything was looking just set. I should just work at the music store and do printmaking as a hobby. Common sense. But. You're a drug addict, you're a drug addict. Whatever, what can I say? I couldn't forget these things. I couldn't put them aside. I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do it that well. So I don't know, crazy or not, I still don't know. I came up with this plan. Here's what to do. Save up for a bunch of time and quit the job at the music shop. Take the wife and kids, hop on a plane, get over to Japan. Somehow get accepted into the country by immigration. You know, they don't just let anybody walk in the door, but whatever, figure that out when we get there. Find a place to live. That should be easy enough. Went to rent an apartment. How to make a living? Well, woodblock prints. I mean, give me a break. You don't suddenly just jump into Japan and start selling woodblock prints. But I had an in. I spoke English. And of course, in Japan, there's huge demand for English teachers all the time. So I thought what we could do is in our apartment there, make one room into an English classroom and get students, and we could make a living at this. And then I would teach English. I would work in my spare time at improving my printmaking skills. And then, you know, of course, I couldn't see that far, but it seemed like a plan. So first step, I visited the Japanese consulate in Vancouver to see if I can get some kind of like student visa or culture visa, whatever, that would allow me to stay in Japan. My application went in, and a couple of weeks back, whatever, phone call or just a mail, I don't remember, rejected, refused. No explanation. I call up, please, no, I'm sorry, it's been refused. In recent years, I've learned actually why. Back then, they don't explain yes or no, but I've learned in recent years that what they were looking for anybody in that era, for anybody who wants to come into Japan to do this, you need, as a basic ground rule, you need a university degree. They're trying to sort of filter, you know, people they want and people they don't want. And I have no university degree at all, still don't. So that was what put me on the outside of that. Anyway, crazy or not, I still can't answer, but I did it anyway, permission or not. One day that spring, I spoke to Bill, the owner of the music shop, and I gave him 3 months' notice. I told him that I would be leaving to try this. And to his credit, he didn't laugh at me outright, you know. He said later, I spoke to him years after this, he said, you know, when I heard that conversation, I knew you'd been interested in doing this, I knew you were going to try it. He said, I gave you in my mind, I gave you about half a year, 6 months or so. Then I thought you'd be back looking for your job or something, you know. 6 months. Well, it's been, what, 32 years and counting, so perhaps we can assume that I won't actually be heading back to the music store. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this up here for now. This is not obviously the complete story, my beginnings to this shop in Asakusa, but what I'm going to do with this video is going to rip into 2 videos. We've done the first part, some of my beginning through some of the prints, things that had a relation to Okada Yoshio. He influenced me quite a lot. What we're going to do then is we're going to wrap this up here. That little family has just left everything in storage in Canada. They've touched down at the airport. They're walking towards the immigration counter. What will happen? We'll leave this here. And the next video will be part 2. We're going to go back to the beginning again. And this time we're going to look at prints and influences that came to me through Adachi Isamu, the guy who runs the Adachi workshop, who also had a huge influence on me in the early years. So that's how part 1 and part 2 of this video series are going to mesh together. So we'll kind of wrap it up. But before I do, I've got to show you a couple more things because they're absolutely related to Okada-san. Roll on from what I told you, and after I was up and running as a printmaker, that's not a spoiler, you know where this is all going to end up, but after I was up and running as a printmaker, I did get a chance to meet Okada-san. There'd been a newspaper story about my work or something in his local newspaper, and he'd said, oh my God, he's here, that guy, I forget his name, whatever. You know, anyway, he saw the story about me, called up Saiki-san, the publisher of these prints, and said, look, can we go talk to this guy? Saiki-san called me, we set it up, can you come on over? And there they are one day, sitting at the kids have gone to school, and the Okada-san's at my kitchen table, and we're sitting and chatting. And I don't remember, you know, the exact words and stuff we said, but I remember a couple of things from the conversation that I will never forget. I'm like, what do I talk to this guy about? He's a world famous artist, and I'm, you know, whatever, nobody. We've got the book that he gave me. We've got it on the table. I've got it open. Perhaps it's to this, because this is one of the images that had quite an impact on me. I've got it open. What do I talk to this guy about? So I said something like, you know, these images of yours, it's really interesting how they show the foreground object is large. We've got the topic in the background. And it really looks as though there's been some influence from Akira Kurosawa, the movie director. And he behaved as though I had hit him with a shotgun. He just banged back in his seat. His face goes sort of blank. And I thought, oh shit, here I am. You know, I've told him his work is derivative and now I'm in big trouble and whatever. And that wasn't it. And again, I don't remember the words he said, but I remember vividly the kind of thing he said. He said, like, I've been doing this since before you were born. I've had exhibitions all over the country. I've made thousands of designs. We've had books published. My work has been exposed all through this country. This is the first time that anybody has ever got to the bottom of what I'm trying to do. And I'm like, I thought it was kind of obvious and whatever. And there's a really, really interesting cultural thing going on here. Me, I could feel free to make this comment to him, even though perhaps when you think about it, it could be considered to be an insult. His work is derivative of Kurosawa-san. I didn't think so, but it could be thought of that way. And that's what would stop Japanese people from ever being able to say something like this. They've been to his exhibitions and they've said, wonderful, oh wonderful, oh wonderful. And he said, thank you, thank you, thank you. And there's never any content. You're not allowed to do that because it could be taken as criticism. So in all the thousands of people he'd talked to, he'd never heard this before. And I thought it was obvious. And he said, yeah, we talked about it. He said, my God, I've got them all on VHS tape. I've stopped frame by frame every one of those videos. I've studied how he did it, what's foreground, what's background, where you pull the focus. He said, I've spent my life trying to make images as good as his movies, you know. So we start talking. We have a grand time. Maybe my wife brings some beer on the table and we're chatting away. We go, this is not. We had a good time. And part of the conversation was he'd seen my work and maybe he was thinking David's a bit better, but probably not there yet. So we didn't make any plans for this, but we left it in the air that at some point in the future, he and I would do something together. We'd use some of his designs for some of our prints, or I say our, but at that time I was a single solo craftsman. So we're still waiting. Nothing has happened yet. We're still waiting. He's getting older. I'm getting older. Will it happen? Don't know. We'll see how it goes. No promises. Can I do this? Can I say this on all? Just one more thing. Just one more thing. He called me again some years after this. And I thought maybe he wants to work together. And no, it wasn't that. It was something really, really different. He was downsizing his home. He's getting older, as I said, and you know, whatever, you downsize. They were tearing their building down, putting up a smaller building. He's got a lot of stuff in the house he had to get rid of. He'd known of my interest in these prints, and what he said on the phone was, would I be interested in having the full block set to this full set of woodblock prints? And I'm like, would I be interested in owning the block set to this woodblock prints? I'm like, I'm over at his front door before I dropped the phone onto the cradle. We rented a truck and got over there. And yeah, he was downsizing. He had no room for them. So of course, I said, yes. I've got them. They've been in my Ome workroom now for a decade and a half or something. I brought one set here to show you, to chat about. Each of the block sets comes wrapped with some trial proofs and stuff like this and some sample printings. And I tell you, I mentioned about that Taisho woodblock, whatever I did with it, as a master class in carving. This is a master class in, I don't know what to say. Let me just tell you the story. I'll use the side camera. I pull up, the first block from the first print. The girl is here. We've got a face and kimono. But the first block I pull up, what do we have here? Well, her face is carved, eyes and nose. There's some eyebrows for her. There's another pair of eyebrows. There's another pair of her eyes carved here. Over here, there's a face has been carved and then chopped off. There's another face here. There's another couple of eyebrows. Under here, that's the final version of the face. You get where we're going at with this. These guys, these four men, the publisher who said, we want to make prints that will rock the world. The designer that said, those old Ukiyo guys think they're pretty good. I'm going to show them how we can design real prints. The carver who is, following this, the printer. These men had a vision. We can make something that's never been here before. And of all the lessons I've learned from all the people I've met and from whatever's mixed up with my own DNA, this is the #1 lesson. Think of something that can be done. Study, work, practice, get together with people who are the best people you can find, and then just don't give up. Try it, cut it off, cut it, try it, cut it off, carve it. At some point, you got to do that famous movie thing. Cut, print, call it a day. But push it, push it, push it, push it. This is the lesson that I learned from these blocks and from what I've learned from these men. Maybe that's a little melodramatic, a little bit over the top. That's it. That's me, and that's these things we've got collected here. That's the story. Anyway, we really do now. We've rambled too much on this, as these videos tend to do. This has been part 1. How long will it be before we get part 2? Hold your breath. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for putting up with this. I hope it's been of interest to you. See you next time.